So in its very name, clinical decision support suggests that you're going to get clinical decisions to the patient. So where it really needs to go is from the big companies who've developed this phenomenal IT and integration, and somehow that has to cross the cultural barrier into the office or into the hospital so that doctors, nurses, and eventually patients can actually use these tools. And that is an enormous cultural leap. The levels of sophistication of patients and providers is very different than the level of sophistication of those who've developed all these tools. So clinical decision support has to actually go from all of these solutions which we've created and bridge those cultural divides and the language barriers and become useful tools to the person or the people who are actually making the clinical decisions. So that's where it has to go, and that's language and culture more than anything else. That's the real challenge. The opportunities for analytics are broad, perhaps as broad as the term analytics. What's interesting is anyone who looks at data says they do analytics. And the real question is how do you get the most out of analytics? So I think there are two opportunities. One is truly what we think about as retrospective analytics, where you take large volumes of data and you can do population health management. So retrospectively you can look at a group based on a condition or disease, or not long from now a genotype, and try to understand them retrospectively and then put processes in place that help that group in terms of their care moving forward. The other very exciting area to me is prospective analytics. So analytics that are real time, so that when a patient is having problems at home, or when they're seen in an urgent care, when they're seen at a doctor's office, the patient and the providers have information, real-time information about that patient that can help keep them out of the hospital. And then finally, the whole field of predictive analytics. So people talk about analytics and they're typically talking about using data, looking back at data, and trying to understand it. Predictive analytics looks back at data, but what it does is it says, based on this, based on taking all this data and putting it through very complex mathematical models, we're going to predict what happens in the future for this patient population, for this group of providers. And again, it's going to be based on condition, going to be based on genotype, et cetera, et cetera. If you have solid models that predict what's going to happen to a patient or a population of patients moving forward in the next year, you have the ultimate opportunity to intervene. So that's what I think. I think we have to stop just throwing around the term analytics and talk about retrospective analytics, prospective analytics, and most importantly, predictive analytics. I think the most exciting thing that I'm seeing at HIMSS, and it's a very high-level answer, is that we're seeing a lot of integration here. We're not seeing companies that just do this or do that, but they're actually talking about how to integrate with other companies, and that's really the power here. So whether we're talking about content, guidelines, order sets, analytics, health information, the reality is that healthcare reform in general, clinical integration specifically, requires all of this to network together, because our customers, which, the customers are ultimately patients, they're ultimately everybody in the United States. Our customers can't have 50 different vendors and think in terms that are broken like that. And at this HIMSS, what we're seeing is that vendors have come together, they have shared solutions, they have integration, and even if they haven't, when you talk to them, they recognize not just that we have to work with an EMR, but that we may need an EMR and we need someone who can help us with content and evidence-based medicine, someone who can help us with analytics to know how to target it, someone who can help us with patient communication. That recognition at HIMSS, I think, is very exciting and is a critical step in getting healthcare reform to the user.